Stage 5. From this stage onward we'll refer our protagonist as Joe and our female lead as Josephine. Joe's stroke happened on the 3rd day of Lunar New Year 2013. We are not going to elaborate on the details of the stroke, but when Joe woke up from his coma, his first memory was the ICU ward. Helper ladies came to his bedside to change the diaper for him. Being a very proud man with extremely high self-esteem, Joe could not bear the sheer sight of this. Then the paralyzed Joe, with all his remaining conscious cells, made a decision to leap from the 6th floor of the hospital. But then he became aware of the fact that with a paralyzed body there was simply no way for him to accomplish this. Joe eventually given up the idea. After a few days after, the doctor in charge of Joe told Josephine that after this stroke Joe would probably never be able to walk again and is completely paralyzed on the left half of his body, and thus urged Josephine to find an elderly home as soon as possible for Joe to live out the rest of his life. Joe certainly could not accept the doctor's argument, as his daughter was only 6 at the time and Josephine is only 38 years old. Joe simply could not leave them and head to death. But because the hospitals in Hong Kong did not have any economical rehabilitation program and facility for middle-aged stroke victims, so Joe and Josephine finally found a stroke rehabilitation center situated in Shenzhen, China, which is managed by the Hong Kong Jockey Club. So after staying in the ICU for around a month and a half, Joe was then transferred to the rehabilitation center. Joe relearned how to balance the body and walk with a clutch at the center, and in another 3 months Joe returned to Hong Kong. Upon returning home, Josephine and daughter were very happy to see Joe, but he also felt that the atmosphere between him and Josephine is not what it used to be. In the next 6 months after that, Joe tried to return to find work in the field where he used to be before the stroke. In the first half of the year his income is understandably a lot worse than Joe before the stroke, as Joe is a record producer and he often has to go to different studios to work, so when many of the record companies found out about his condition, they are not willing to hire Joe to be their singers producer. So that in addition to Joe being a record producer, Joe also began to work as a part-time lecturer of music production at different colleges and universities and pop music schools in an attempt to acquire a new source of income. In the next 6 months, although Joe began to have some income, but the income is not enough to pay the rent of their rented apartment, so Josephine will need to use the home operational fund. Joe and Josephine, after the sale of their old apartment at Central, half of the money was used to open a recording studio. The remaining half Josephine used to bought a small apartment unit in the suburb and rent it out, and from doing this Josephine was able to attain an extra source of income for the family. But just before the stroke, Josephine has to sell this small investment because Joe's work and income is always unstable, and Joey doing this, Josephine helped to pay for all expenses at home. The expectation of Joe's income will increase from time didn't occur, as a couple of months later Joe could not even pay for the house's electric bill, not to mention other expenses. At that point the final straw falls, and afterward Josephine and Joe decided to separate. Josephine and their daughter will move to an apartment on Kowloon, and Joe alone will move to Yuen Long to rent a room as his workshop and a place to stay. In the 5th stage, the man's song My Stupid Love seems to be a sad and resentful song because Joe is separated from Josephine and their daughter, but in fact, it is because Joe is extremely annoyed and resents himself for causing things to develop this way. A song of shame by him is the fact. The girl's side song Ponte de Sospiri is Josephine's inner conflict between love and the cruel reality of life.
窩心，你的愛得滿分，切下擂台令我始終不夠分。你傷心因我未能達到春後應允，又常犯小過。其實了解我像我這片真心放於你的門邊，最弊原來是我始終不夠分。你一天將我定為垃圾，親手打掃絕情弄走我。明白我不甘分開千里，默然步進深深小徑，自行附根化。期待你將會望回來，期待你將會望回來。令我始終不夠分，你傷心因我未能達到親口應允，又常犯小過。其實了解我將我這片真心放於你的門邊，最弊原來是我始終不夠分。你一天將我定為垃圾，親手打掃絕情弄走我。明白我不甘，我將我這片真心放於你的門邊，最弊原來是我始終不夠分。你一天將我定為垃圾，親手把我丟，願從此一生不再重聚。Goodbye。
同你分開咗，已經差唔多有3年啦。但唔知道點解，我每晚臨瞓之前，一定要對住部手機上面你嗰幅相，同佢講埋早唞先可以瞓得着。可能你會認為我係黐線嘅，不過老實講，我真係冇辦法可以制止到自己咁樣去做。如果有人認為時間可以沖淡一切，而我咁樣去做係唔可以真正咁去放低呢段感情嘅話，好明顯係佢未全心全意咁去愛過一個人。
同行常令我倦疲，無視錯愛的真相，不再共對使我心入面愉快舒暢。明白你決心改變，埋下了伏線卻不變，一天終於竟覺失落在路那出口，終於展開雙翅，躍出死角，於天空裏飛越愁緒，愛上移墮雲裏。我的心能有罪， 心改變，埋下了伏線卻不變。一天終於經過失落在路那窗口，終於展開相似，約出死角，於天空裏飛越愁緒。愛上移動雲裏，我的心能又再愉快的飛向天，一生的悶氣消於朗日裏。曾被抬對的，曾被錯配的，在面對被愛所傷透的一聲空邂，救活在心水，不必再問是哪方不對。
兩個人之間嘅嘢，從來都冇第三個人可以真正了解得到。雖然我好清楚知道，唔會再有機會遇到一個好似你咁愛我嘅男人。不過當我諗到要保護我哋最愛嘅女，